Welcome to Journey at Home. We really appreciate you choosing to join us from wherever you're watching. And if it's your first time, we hope it won't be your last. I'm Jarrod, and our mission is to create content that inspires you to follow Jesus and live a better life. So you'll want to click the subscribe button, and don't forget the bell so you get the notifications and you can keep up with what we'll be doing the next few weeks. So I'm starting a new series today called Struggle Bus. And obviously, we don't want you to be on the struggle bus. I don't want to be on the struggle bus. Nobody chooses to hop on the struggle bus for a ride, but sometimes we're on it. So what do we do while we're on it? And is there a way to get off the struggle bus? Now that's what we hope to help you figure out. Because the reality is that some of us feel like our marriage is on the struggle bus. Is this the same person I married? I mean, the romance seems to be gone. We don't hold hands anymore. We don't really talk about anything except like what the kids are doing or about money and the problems we got to solve. Or maybe you feel like you're on the struggle bus at work. Like, I'm doing okay, but this isn't my dream job. My boss isn't terrible, but sometimes I just don't want to give this job my best, or it feels like my best is never enough. So, man, I'll just give mediocre effort to it, and I'd be getting a different one, but a job's a job, right? So, like, it pays the bills. Or maybe for some of it's our health. Am I ever going to feel better? Is there an answer for this diagnosis? The treatments and the tests and the waiting and the waiting and the waiting, it's like my entire life is on hold and I don't even know if anything is actually going to work to make me feel better. Maybe some of us are just struggling with our finances. You know, like, I thought I'd be enjoying a new house by now, but I'm still just renting. And the car I'm driving just keeps stealing my savings for repairs, and I just can't seem to get ahead, and the kids, and travel sports, and vacations, and then, oh yeah, I actually have to pay my bills too. I'd love to be able to give more and help other people, but I'm just on the struggle bus. In the midst of all of this, the stress and uncertainty, we keep telling ourselves a story, don't we? And often the story we're telling ourselves is the very thing that traps us and keeps us on the struggle bus. Things aren't going great at work, and you're in a meeting, and during your presentation, you hear a coworker just let out a big sigh. And in that moment, you tell yourself that obviously you're tanking this presentation, your ideas are boring everyone, and this project you've worked so hard on has been a waste of time. And that story just reinforces the story you've been telling yourself already about this job, that it just isn't any good. Or how about this story? Your wife comes home from work and you're trying to smile and talk about your day, and she just goes right into clean it up, make dinner, do laundry mode, like check on the baby. Hey, why didn't you change your diaper yet? And completely ignoring your attempt to make some sort of personal connection here. And so you start telling yourself a story about how the love has died, passion is gone, and you two are no longer compatible. Gosh. Even something as simple as texting a friend, we tell ourselves a story like you don't get a response after 48 hours, and suddenly in your head there's a story about how little this person actually respects or cares about you. And you knew that this friendship would end eventually. Like, when we're on the struggle bus, we often don't pay enough attention to the stories we tell ourselves. The stories we tell ourselves become the stories we make decisions out of. Those stories determine how we respond and how long we stay on the struggle bus. And there's a pattern to the stories we tell ourselves. And those patterns can either help us or really hurt us. Stories are powerful because our brains were wired by God to love stories and to tell stories. The problem is we extend our time on the struggle bus by telling ourselves stories that try to put us in control. Let me give you an example. We sometimes try to tell ourselves a story that we can prevent pain from coming into our lives, which isn't at all true. So when pain hits, whether emotional or physical, we do everything we can to distract ourselves from the pain, because if we can forget about the pain, we feel like we gain some control again. And even though the pain is still there, distracting ourselves is this attempt to tell a story that we can keep pain away. But distraction from pain always leads us to dependency. Whatever it is we use to distract ourselves from the pain, like drugs or alcohol or money or more work or more sex or more shopping, whatever it is that helps us believe the story that we can prevent life from having pain, that's what we do and we get dependent on. Here's another example. Sometimes things will go bad and we'll start to get angry. We get angry because we're telling ourselves a story that everyone and everything is against me. Or maybe even you go so far as to say that God is against me. And the anger is our way of trying to get control over all the enemies we see in our lives. And they're all out to get me, And if I'm on my own, then I'll need to defend myself and strike before they strike me again. But the story that everyone is against me, that it just ends in isolation, really. Anger, when misdirected, tries to control other people or even control God. But attempting to control others always isolates us. One last story to consider. Think about this example. When we're faced with a lot of uncertainty or unexpected difficulty, we'll sometimes tell ourselves the story that life is too hard or I can't handle this. And in order to gain control, we will become passive, because choosing not to engage in life and doing nothing and just letting everything go is a desperate attempt to at least be in control of ourselves. But passivity brings depression and shame. Rather than getting control, we give up. The worst part of all these stories of control and others like them is that we end up using people as a means to our own personal ends. Our coworkers become people to be used to get me to the top. My friends become people whose main purpose is just to support my emotional health. Or my kids and spouse are here to make me look good to the people in the community, and when they don't do that, then my anger is justified. Everyone in our lives becomes a sidekick in the movie about our amazing life, and everything is about me and my struggles and how others can help me feel and do better. And if we have a relationship with God at all, we end up using God as a genie. We'll tell ourselves things like, well, if I can give just a little bit of money, then God will bless me with my next paycheck. Or if I pray the prayers the right way and read the Bible enough every day, He'll make me feel better. Or maybe you've done this, you promise to do the right things, knowing that He'll just remove your problems if you do them all, right? So listen, how are those stories working for you? The ones that you're telling yourself, are those stories that you try to put you in control actually putting you in control? Are the stories you're telling yourself about the pain in your life helping you get off the struggle bus? Or are they just making things worse in the long run? See, there's a guy named Paul, an early follower of Jesus, who showed us a different story to tell ourselves when we find ourselves on the struggle bus. Paul has quite the resume of suffering. Just to be honest with you, I just listened to a few things he says about his life from 2 Corinthians chapter 11. He says this, 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day on the open sea. I've been constantly on the move. I've been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false believers. I've labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. With all of that pain and suffering, it's kind of surprising the kind of story Paul begins to tell. He doesn't tell a story that tries to put himself in control. He doesn't use distraction or anger, and he doesn't just give up either. Earlier in this same letter to the Corinthians, the people in the city of Corinth, he explained this. He had 4 clear things that gave him a different story, a better story, that he used to guide his life off of the struggle bus. Let me show you what Paul writes. He wrote this. First, he says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort." I mean, do you hear that? When Paul is on the struggle bus, he tells a story that God is full of compassion and comfort, which seems strange because things aren't really going that well. But Paul focuses his story on God who is with him, cares for him, loves him, and comforts him when things don't go well. I mean, that's huge. How many times do we just assume that God doesn't care or that He's distant? But that's not all of Paul's story. He continues to talk about God in this way. He says, God who comforts us in our all troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. So the pain has a purpose in Paul's story. When God comforts us, we learn better how to comfort others around us in the midst of their pain. See, God gives, so we learn to give. I mean, that changes the story. I often find myself thinking my pain is useless and random. And Paul says that God can teach us to be a comfort to others. So it's not about me. So look at the third thing Paul includes in his story. He says, we were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. Paul doesn't try to make light of his pain. He doesn't try to ignore his pain or distract himself from the pain. He acknowledges how deep the pain is. See, Paul's story admits that this pain is too much for him to manage on his own. He comes to the end of his ability to control the circumstances. And finally, Paul makes this statement in his story. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. See, Paul's story wasn't about giving up. It was about shifting his hope onto God while he was on the struggle bus. He wasn't relying on distraction or anger or going passive and giving up. Paul trusted God even when things weren't going well. Listen, if you're on the struggle bus, take your story from Paul's story. When we choose to trade out control for trust in God, we can ride the struggle bus with purpose and hope, and we begin to experience God's comfort. We end up on the struggle bus and then stay on the struggle bus longer because we often keep telling ourselves stories about control for us. Rather than admitting the pain, reminding ourselves that God is with us and He loves us, and that He has a purpose for us, and that He is our hope. So try one of these simple activities this week to help you tell yourself a new story if you're on the struggle bus. Here we go. Write down 3 things you're grateful for every single day. Write them on your phone or on a notepad. Remind yourself what God has given you in the midst of your struggle. Or try this one. Write down what you're afraid of. I know, that's really going to be easy. But then here's what you have to write next to each fear. You write this simple phrase, God, I know you're with me. Just imagine doing that with all your fears. Just remember to tell yourself the story of a compassionate, comforting God. Here's my last suggestion. Memorize 2 Corinthians verse 3 and 4 from chapter 4. He says this, Praise to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. Listen, as you begin to tell a different story while you're on the struggle bus, you'll find that the truth is that even while you're on that bus, God is with you. And that changes everything.